Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Akil and joining me today is John Müller, IT lead of the Analytics Engineering Department of ING, and we talk about leadership in tech. Especially at big organizations like ING, there's a lot of complexity in hiring, delivering, being responsible without being hands-on. John shares all of that and more. So enjoy. You and I were in a call and I heard you speak about hiring. That it's one of the most important things that you can do. And I was like, he's right. But the way you said it, like that shows that you've had a lot of, at least experience with regards to hiring people and the right people. You also mentioned that as things get more complex, you need more specialized people. I wonder how you at least ensure that you have the right people on board, because for me, that's always the tricky part.
To sound like a real corporate guy, in the end, it's process, right? You need to put a good process in place. But that starts with figuring out what you want, right? So what's the process supposed to represent?
Yeah.
So when I speak about hiring, and I'm not lying, it's indeed based on a lot of my own personal experience and all the people who taught me, who came before me, is you need to think about what kind of people am I looking for? It's the old mercenary versus missionary kind of discussion, right? Are you looking for missionaries who will take whatever you want and evangelize it left, up, down, right? Or are you looking for a mercenary? Something just needs to get done quickly, move on to the next thing, or any 50 shades of gray in between. Once you figure out what kind of people you're looking for in general, then try to make that into a process. So, for example, what we did, and actually it was based on the same hiring principle at Exhibia at the time, or Go Data Driven back then, was make sure you split it into different parts of the things that you want to check, but also making sure that multiple sets of eyes look at an angle of the same thing. So to make that specific, first, there's the technical hard skills, especially in software engineering and anything related to it. Yeah, just can you code? Do you understand it? What seniority of level do you understand?
Yeah.
But then that's by all means the easy one, right? That's fairly binary. You can other people look at whatever the person did and come, no, medium, meteor, senior, and so on. The two other interviews that we did back then were around HR, more classical. Okay, what do you want? Why this company? I don't think we ever asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years? At least I don't hope so. But it's those kind of questions, just to get a sense of, the basics, if you will.
Gotcha.
And the thing that stood out for me was always that we had something which we originally called team fit. Then we at some point renamed it to something a bit more inclusive, to culture add. Does somebody add something to the culture?
Yeah.
And the basic premise, as one of our colleagues that you also know, Fab, always says, do I just like this person? Would I like to work with this person? And that was it. So you had 3 interviews, 2 people in each interview, so 6 pairs of eyes. And all 6 people have to say yes at the end of the interview.
Okay.
It can be that I, as manager of the department, say yes, but the most junior engineer that just did an interview for the first time says no.
Okay.
And has a good reason. But even there, I will not push too hard. If he says, I clearly think no, then it's a no.
Wow.
And that has helped a lot over the years, because of course, we're human, so sometimes you get the 5 times yes and the 1 time, yeah. The number of times that it didn't work out in the end, or at least there were questions, I can almost always hark back to, that's pretty close to why the one person said, I'm not sure. And especially the ones where somebody said no, but then you came in with an example of, but it's just for the first 6 months. We'll figure it out later. Or he's a nice guy. Not everybody needs to be really good. Yeah, that's where it always starts hurting.
Exactly. That's where you cut corners, it feels like.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm curious because I had a conversation, I think it must have been close to a year ago, with this person from Miro. And they have a very standardized, I think the only kind of blueprint for software engineering hiring out there is lead code and system design. That's like bread and butter. And from his perspective, he really liked lead code from an applicant perspective, because you can really train for it, right? You at least know what you're getting into and you can train yourself to solve these algorithms. But he also says that, at least in Miro, at some point it will matter. You don't know when. 95% of the time it's not going to matter. But when that 5% is there, then everyone went through kind of this bar, and people at least have a common understanding of how to solve it. And I thought, that's interesting. Maybe it's because I never worked in those types of environments. And we do have quite of a high bar. So getting then someone in that also passed that bar, I can see that kind of helping the culture and at least helping with a common level of trust.
Yeah.
But system design and lead code, for me, that's like the almost exclusive blueprint that's out there when it comes to testing for technical skills. Every other company that I've heard talk is more of a conversation, sometimes a live coding session, some other flavor that works really well for them, but it's not become a blueprint, not really a standard that companies adopt.
No, and I think I've had this discussion quite a bit over the last year-ish when we were looking at redoing our hiring, because we need to hire a lot.
Yeah.
So you also need to keep some sort of pace in there, but also keep it manageable. And there's many different angles to it, but I'm actually quite opinionated on what the entire process looks like. It'd be shocking for everyone here. But, and one of the things is that we always used to do the take-home case.
Gotcha.
Right? Because to give somebody some time to prepare, we always said that spend about 8 hours on it. You can spend 48 hours on it. You can spend 4 hours on it. That's up to you. Right? That's how you want to prepare for the interview. But because ING is not necessarily an environment where you need to deploy code 5 minutes after you've written it. Actually, that's really what we don't want you to do. Take your time, think through thoroughly, and so on. I always dislike the idea of live coding because it creates this kind of atmosphere of, oh shit, what's the syntax here again? I'm getting nervous and so on, where it's not representative to what actual work environment in ING looks like.
Yeah.
But I was getting pushback, especially in not the Netherlands, but in Poland, but also in Romania. The take-home exam was a hurdle for applicants because they needed to spend time where they were.
It's a commitment.
Yeah, it's a commitment versus live coding or maybe just a conversation and so on. So, at least I'm open to listen. So I said, okay, as long as we can find a way that, because we turned it into a live coding exercise, as long as the live coding doesn't turn into, what's the syntax? I need to get this out in 10 seconds. I'm getting so nervous. As long as it doesn't turn into that, but we do have the time to check what you want to check as an engineer, then I'm fine with it. So stay open to the idea of change, right? Otherwise you get stuck in whatever you were doing before. But for me, it was also important that it does somehow reflect the work environment that you're going to work in. Because why else are you doing this?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I like pair programming, but that's from a sense of productivity. And at some point, it's also comfort and learning from another perspective, right?
Yes.
Doing that in the interview process, I can see how that's kind of daunting. But in essence, take-home exercise is what we have here. That's how I got in the first place. Yeah. And it was the same as you mentioned. You get 8 hours. You can spend less. You can spend more. I told them I spend more, and I didn't finish the exercise because that was my level at the time. I was like, if it's not enough with this time spent, it's like, I don't belong here, basically.
Yeah.
In the end, I got in, but that was like one of the interview steps. There was a more, we call it culture fit. I like culture add more, I think, linguistically, but that's always there. I've never gone through, I've applied. I have gone through system design and lead code. It's just never been kind of what I, from an interviewer standpoint, look at.
Me neither. When I did the same thing when I had already been hired at ING, but I wanted to be first time I was an engineering manager, chapter lead as we call it, for data engineering. My then manager said, "It's fine if you want that, but you need to go through the case just as everyone else did."
Nice.
So I also spent way more than 8 hours. I also did not finish everything because it was a reflection of how good I was as a programmer back then.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm a better manager than a programmer. Let's put it that way. And I never went through that system design either. In the end, it doesn't matter to me the way you check it. Like the entire the entire premise of our hiring procedure is that you hire your own colleagues, right? It's 6 people. Hopefully, a few of them you will actually start working with, and otherwise, of the larger department of which you're a part of. It is in your own best interest to get everything you want out of that interview to make a good judgment call on, is this somebody that can help us in doing whatever it is that we want to do? Because experience tells me a mishire is one of the most draining things you can do to a team, right? And they can be either not a good fit or add to the culture of a team or squad or whatever you want to call it, which is draining, right? Everybody walking around on eggshells, you stand up, is this going to go well? Or are we going to get in an argument? Or the other one, a person just doesn't cut it technically, also super draining. I've been part of both. And it's in your best interest to get what out of the interview you need to make a good judgment call. And of course, you standardize a little bit to help everyone. But if you as an engineer say, I understand everything I need to know by looking at one line of code, fine. I need to look at a take-home case that somebody spent at least 24 hours on. Okay, then we'll push back a little bit. We'll give them 8. Yeah. But yeah, are you comfortable? Can you make a decision? But and then in the background of my mind, you see all the stats. Like most people know within 30 seconds whether they're going to hire somebody.
Exactly. Yeah. I like that you highlight that from your experience. You've been in both situations, right? Where you felt that, okay, a bad hire has detrimental consequences, basically.
Yep.
For me, that's what I look in leadership, right? Not only when they speak that people listen and they get buy-in, but they have the experience to back it up. Some people speak in like it's not really substantial anymore. Some stuff feels outdated. Like that's how we did it 10, 15 years ago. Well, 10, 15 years ago nowadays is a long, long time. Like that is ridiculous. I wasn't even in the field nowadays. So things move really quickly. I recently had a person on, Marcel de Vries, also from Xebia, and he said that he strongly believes that leadership in tech should be technical. So also have hands-on experience and keep their technical skills up to date. And I find myself agreeing with that just of the fact of if you have outdated skills, then it's harder to get buy-in from my perspective. I'm curious to hear your perspective because you do have experience to back it up.
Yeah.
But you've also been hands-off, I think, for a long, long time, no?
Yeah, true. Definitely true. I wouldn't trust myself to code anything right now. No, I think there's levels to it. And my architect friends will laugh, but I'm going to say it depends.
Okay.
Because that's their favorite answer to everything. Yeah. It depends. When I started out, ING was in a more generalistic management kind of hiring style. So be a generalist. You don't need to know the details. That's what you have other people for and so on.
How long ago was this?
12 years.
Gotcha.
Almost 12 years at ING now. And already back then I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Because if my manager doesn't even have the first clue what I'm talking about, how is he or she supposed to help me?
How's this going to work?
How's this going to work?
Yeah.
So they also told me, because I was hired as a management trainee in IT, like make sure you learn a craft first, like know something, and then you can always go into management. And I always struggled with that a little bit because when do you know something? When do you own a craft? When are you good at something or good enough? Yeah, an expert. I sure as hell was not going to be an expert after 2 years because I've worked with a lot of people also from Go to Drave. I was like, I'm not going to get there in 2 years. Yeah. So I always struggled with that. But nevertheless, I had fun as an engineer, data engineer, we would call it now. I learned a lot. And at some point, I also realized, but management and technical skills are two very different things. And especially if you're a manager of engineers, I think it is important to know the technical details. But once you get to a manager of managers, it becomes less about it. Of course, it helps. I refer to myself as unbullshittable in my field.
I love that.
It's extremely rare in ING to have, or at least I guess mostly everywhere, that I'm in senior management, but know the ins and outs of the department that I run, like the average engineer there. Because for the most part, when you hit my level, you've probably moved around a few times. You might have been a back-end developer, and now you're looking after a mortgages tribe or something along those lines. But that isn't because these people are not good at what they're doing. Not at all, actually. I rarely, if ever, see senior managers where I go like, how did this person get this job?
Okay.
It's because it becomes about a wildly different skill set. It's about stakeholder management. It's about communication. It's about inspiring. It's about people management. And the content should be as little as possible. I might have even said it during the last OKR review. If something in operational day-to-day business hits my desk, I don't have a desk, but a virtual desk, then something went wrong. which is not bad. Things go wrong all the time. Yeah, it's fine. It's not an indictment on anyone, but something did go wrong. Because if it skips multiple management layers and nobody could solve it there, technical leads, squads, and so on, and somehow it reaches me like, John, can you help us solve this? First of all, more than happy to help. How can I? And second of all, what went wrong?
Yeah.
Is there something we need to learn from this? Sometimes it's just, everything is down because a firewall change didn't go through. You need to know. It's like, okay, fair.
Good.
Right? Good that you let me know, because people will start calling me. In another case, it's more of a, we don't agree. You need to decide on something. Also fine, right? An escalation in itself is never a bad thing, right? It's just, okay, we at the same level, we don't agree. Next highest level, can you help us? But something did go wrong. Yeah. So, nowadays, if I need to go into the details, I'm probably not doing my job very well.
Gotcha. Yeah. I can see that it's a different skill set, but something that you mentioned of the people that I'm surrounded with, like senior leadership, I never have the sense of how they get this job. From my perspective, maybe it's because I'm not in those circles or not having those conversations. Sometimes I do see people, and I'm at a consultancy, so I go in and out of companies a lot. Sometimes I do have this feeling of, okay, how did this person get this role?
I'll be fair. Of course, I have those moments too. But at some point, the higher you climb, the less often you see it.
Gotcha.
Simple fact that also correspondingly, the impact of a mishire becomes bigger and bigger, right? And the company just cannot afford to have a really, really bad manager or senior tech person or a tech lead or whatever you want to call it in a position of great influence, because correspondingly, the impact is bigger and bigger, right? Not being said that you cannot be super influential as an engineer, right? But from the perspective of setting the direction of an entire company and it's just not heading where it's supposed to, you cannot afford that much. So there's also this self-correction mechanism at least in large corporate like ING, at some point you will get found out if it's not going very well.
Gotcha. Yeah. For people in leadership, I wonder how they kind of self-reflect and grow, because from my perspective, I have a different role than I had a couple of years ago, right? I'm doing product management now. Before that, I was doing software engineering. And a lot of decisions that I make are based on kind of a fundamental understanding of software engineering. I feel like if people, or at least leadership, don't have that, it's like, what else do you rely upon? How do you get this gut feeling to get buy-in or to communicate and say the right things sometimes even? Because from your perspective, I can see you have had hands-on experience, right? You have had experience with people in teams that are maybe not the right fit, or an experience where things went really smoothly and you can still kind of success factors and try and educate others with that. And I think you do it quite successfully. That's getting buy-in, right? But for people that don't have that, I don't know how they get that experience or what they rely upon. How do they grow?
Yeah. The first and worst answer to hear for everyone is experience, right? Just seeing things and seeing around you. But that being said, I'm relatively young for the position I hold, so it's not definitely the only thing.
Yeah,
I know people even younger than me climbed even higher in ING, so it's not the only thing. But you need to be open and learn and listen as much as you can, right? There is different ways of going through the same thing, right? You can sit in a meeting and think, why am I here? I should be coding. I'm not spending my time well. I should be doing other things where I have bigger impact, more value, which could very well be true for that meeting. The other one is apparently somebody thought it was important that I'm here. What can I take away from this? And even if it's not something content related, like I'm not going to learn how to make a better backend today in this meeting, fine. But how is this person trying to communicate its business requirements? What problem am I really trying to solve here, right? You as product manager. And that's something you must have learned also through your software engineering, because not every software engineer makes a good product manager and vice versa, of course. But at some point you must have also gone through the phase of, hey, what problem are we trying to solve? Is this a problem worth solving? Am I as an engineer actually spending my time in the most impactful way? I might have fun coding what I'm doing, but if that code is never going to amount to anything, at least for me, that's where it started. Like I wanted to make sure that if I was going to spend my time working on something, that it was the right thing. And that takes then many different branches, right? For me, that very quickly meant going into people management. Like, how can I help others be successful?
You hit the nail on the head, I think, at least for me, because those questions, that's the reason why I do product management, right? I was always in conversations where it was like, I don't want to build something that is of no value. I have fun building it. I see other people that have more fun building it, and they'll gladly build whatever. I'm not that person. I want my stuff to be used and valuable. And if I don't agree, then at some point it's like, I would love to have the responsibility and have those conversations. Sure, I missed the hands-on part, but that was then the next step. I don't know if this is what I want to do next. For me, it's not really, let's say, depth with regards to career. It's like a sidetrack, because product and software, sure, they go hand in hand, but they have different career paths. You go senior staff, principal, indeed maybe engineering manager. That's more the people side. Product has its own track completely. For you, you did climb, and you climbed quite quickly. You also said you're young for the position that you have. Did you always envision yourself climbing a ladder like that?
No, not at all. It's a question I've had before. It actually, the answer is no. I didn't envision that way, but I did envision where I wanted to be.
Okay.
And that was not because of a title or something. It was basically, I wanted to make it concrete. I wanted to be a manager of an analytics department.
Gotcha.
Which I became.
Yeah.
So you can also say I'm done. I can just, I can keep
that was the next question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Keep doing this for the next, 30, 40 years and then retire happily.
Yeah.
Now, I knew I wanted to be a manager in analytics. And I think that had more to do with being able to help steer, direct strategic decisions and people management. Because I knew that that's what I had a lot of fun with. And it had to be analytics, because that's, I've done
bread and butter.
I've done nothing else at ING for 12 years, which is also relatively unique. But did I then sit down and go like, okay, then I need to make this step and then that step and then I need to do that? Not at all.
Yeah.
It's a combination of pure dumb luck, people leaving at a certain point in time and then saying, oh, I think John should be my successor. It's like, okay, cool. If he didn't leave, then the position wouldn't have been there. Twice that happened, by the way. But also, for example, we then went to a bit of a restructuring and we're growing bigger, talking about more complex other things that you want other people to deal with. Non-financial risk, something that you'll now be intimately familiar with your time in ING, right? Things like IT security and compliance and legal and so on. And they were looking for somebody to set up a team around that. And then they came to me, because when I started at ING in analytics, we were 3 people. So it was like a startup. Everybody did everything. And one of the things I did was non-financial risk, not because I'm particularly fond of it, but it's just, if you're one of 3 people, everybody does something. Everybody does everything. But I did that at that point, and they set up a team around. I was like, okay, fine, let me go and do that. So for 2 years, I did non-financial risk. I didn't write a single line of code.
Okay.
I only talked to people who wrote code. I was more into policy and AI ethics and ethical use of data and legal. I know more about GDPR than I'd like to care to admit. But it was super helpful.
Okay.
Because to this day, I'm also relatively unbullshittable on non-financial risk matters.
Yeah, it's all relevant.
It's all relevant. But for 2 years, I did something which I would never thought I would do. I like it to the day that I did this. Also, after 2 years, I said, I'm done.
Okay.
This is enough. Now I wanted, that's when I became engineering manager. So it was a big step, because I hadn't done anything for 2 years. To go back into coding and then being first time actual people manager back then. But I learned a lot, content-wise, but also setting up a team, thinking about what kind of different specialists do I need? How do I figure out the Venn diagram that with the least amount of people, I think I got to hire 3 others plus myself, so 4 in total. How do I capture most of the specialisms that I think we need with 3 people I can hire? That's super interesting. And then finding the people, building it into a team, working together. I was product owner back then. Super interesting.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't have a claim, but being open to positions, listening, learning as much as I can, that has been a constant. And sometimes just being lucky. Oh, and the one advice that I got, which has now been true 2 times already, is that sometimes there's a moment like your current position, either you're bored or it ceases to exist, or these moments where you're unsure what to do. And 2 different people, without knowing it, said the exact same thing to me. It's like, John, just wait. Something will come. Don't worry. We'll see what happens. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm not a very patient person by heart. So I was like, okay, I'll take. And both times, well, like I already said, somebody left.
Okay.
And they said, okay, come in here, go and do this. And the second time, same thing happened. Somebody else left and they asked me for the position. So sometimes just being patient is also fine.
Man, I hear your advice and I understand it. It's just,
It's really hard.
It's really hard. I hope you're really hard for someone to say, just wait. And you see no way out, basically.
Of course, there are levels to this. I was both times I was not like sitting on a burning chair that I had to get out immediately.
No, but still, yeah.
But I'll also be honest, those moments where you're less busy, there's not much to do, there's a lot of unclarity, super uncomfortable to me. Like it was during COVID, the first time that it happened. I didn't have anything to do really, like legitimately nothing to do.
Like work-wise?
Yeah, work-wise.
Okay.
Because basically my people had left.
Oh yeah.
I was manager of in a reorganization.
You can't manage no one.
I was literally manager of none.
Yeah.
But I didn't move with the people. So the work also it was really vague. Everything was really vague. And I just walked.
Okay.
Just went outside for walks, endless walks. And then just also keep talking to my manager. Just being, I got nothing to do.
Yeah.
What do you have to? Don't worry. Just, it will come. Just go for your walks.
Yeah. Interesting. How vocal were you? Because I'm very jealous and I'll tell you why. Not for the position or anything, but you had a clear vision of where you wanted to be at some point. I don't have that. It's like, I like this and I like that. And I try and do everything until that vision becomes more crisp. But until it does, I find myself kind of in limbo and trying everything. And I like the perspective you bring because I also feel like right now it doesn't really matter. I can do a lot of things and I'll take bits and pieces and they will have value in the future in their own way. Maybe certain interactions, maybe certain hard skills. I have no clue. Soft skills probably.
For sure.
For sure. Because we're going to deal with people in any case. But I want to be able to grow to a position that I'm like, this is where I want to be, or at least where my starting point is for the next thing that has more depth. And it sounds like even though people told you to wait, I'm not sure how vocal you were with where you want it to be. I feel like if you are very clear-minded of where do I want to be, you can also communicate that and people are able to help you.
Absolutely.
Get that.
Absolutely. From the beginning with my managers, I had two managers. I had two managers in my first 8 years at ING and they were like joined at the hip.
Okay.
And I told them from the start, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So, or this is what I want to grow to.
Of course.
Put it that way.
Yeah.
So indeed, they put me in all sorts of positions. Like I was already managing people before I ever was a manager. It was like, oh, we got interns incoming. Please help take care of them. Or, oh, you want to do the appraisal cycle of this person this year? You can do it on my behalf. So it's also because that current manager hated it.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was
like win-win.
It was a win-win.
Yeah.
But it's also because I let him know.
Of course.
He's like, okay, you're interested in this, please, by all means. I don't like it, so you do it for me. Yeah, absolutely, being vocal. And this is also what I try to do with people right now. One of the biggest joys I get out of my position today is that because I've been 12 years at ING, I'm very connected. So I can usually help people if they say, I want to have a change or I want to be open to a new challenge or something. That because I know so many people, I can help them quite often. Like, oh, hey, I know something's happening here, or make an introduction left or right, those kind of things. And that starts with that I need to know that you are interested in a certain opportunity, because if I do not know, then I cannot help you.
Yeah.
And of course, you don't need to tell me personally. It can also be through your manager or whatever, that in some sort of conversation, it pops up like, hey, this lady would like to be in product management next. All right, well, we have something small there. Why don't you see what you do there? I think that's also something that is strong within ING in general, that we try to help develop people internally.
I like that. I like that a lot. Like I would struggle with giving you kind of a context of, okay, where do I want to be in 5 years? I hate that question. But what do I like now? And what do I want to do more of? Or what role seems interesting and what do I want to try out? Like those things, that's why I'm at a consultancy, basically. Like those are the things that I can do. I have the freedom to do. I do have to have a certain set of skills because as a consultant, things are just expected of you.
Yeah.
Like that makes sense. But that for me is growth, right? And at some point also comes comfort. And with comfort, I want to get to uncomfortable again.
Yeah.
Not really, willingly so, but it's just because I know that's good for me. That's where growth is.
Yeah.
I'm wondering with you, because you said you go from one position to another thing that you might have never done, and then you're hands off for 2 years and you go kind of back to technical again. How was that dealing with uncomfortableness for you? You good at that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Just naturally.
Yeah, no, I'm there's a tattoo here on my arm which says "No worries," which is
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Which
That's a fun fact.
It's a fun fact. Yeah, if it would have been summer, I would have shown you, but it's a little bit too cold right now. No, so I'm not a person that worries a lot in general about things that I don't think are that important.
Okay.
I mean, of course, if I were a brain surgeon, I would say I'm pretty important stuff all day long. But in a lot of times, I'm like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? I write shitty code. What's the worst that can happen? All right, somebody corrects me because I got a policy wrong from some sort of legal thing. The one thing where I'll make an exception where I do care if I get wrong is people management.
Oh.
Because that's the one where I had this conversation last week. Like, you won't find me staying up late at night stressing about the fact that we're not going to hit some sort of deadline, because nobody dies if we don't make it.
Yeah.
Literally, nobody dies. Ever. In this field. In this field. But what does stay with me is like people struggling, right? If you're a manager, especially manager of managers, there's a lot of people that you're responsible for. And yeah, life happens to everyone, right? Shitty things happen, and they're usually outside of the control of everyone. And then they add up, right? Like the people you see go into burnouts, there's always something going on personally. There's something going on at work. It's never just one thing. And those are the ones that I struggle with. So there I would be afraid to make a mistake.
Yeah. Do you take that with you? Like in CBI right now, I'm part of, they call that team leads. So I'm responsible for personal development of a smaller group of people. And we also have conversations with other team leads. And one person really struggled with that. They said that if someone tells me a problem, and they don't even do it, it's just I take it as my problem. And then I worry at night about their problem, which has now become my problem.
Yeah.
He says that's a problem.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, there is always, you need to make sure that what's in your influence to control, right? That doesn't mean we're not human, that you cannot, stay awake because something really bad happened.
Yeah.
That's just life. But if it's inside your control, try to see how you can help. Actually, I've had the conversation many times over the years. What do you do when somebody's struggling at work with delivering, but that person is probably struggling with delivering because something's happening personally?
Gotcha.
Like a relative that is very sick, or a pet that can also be very impactful, or anything that's going on. Like, how far do you take into consideration that something is happening in their personal life, which they can or may not be able to control, but it is influencing their work? Right? Because in the end, you work for XEBI, I work for ING, they pay us, we pay that person to deliver a certain something. How far can you go in saying, okay, maybe you need to deliver a little bit less right now while you deal with this, and how long can you keep that up?
Yeah.
Right? That's a very, very tricky balance to strike. Something that we will, as people managers, will struggle with undoubtedly,
Forever.
all of us.
Yeah.
At some point. And yeah, the wisdom that I got from one of my former managers was like, you know what? Everything is fine as long as that person is still delivering, and delivering according to what you agreed to. It's the moment that it becomes uncertain, that it's affecting also their dependability. All right. And that has nothing to do with if you're actually available. It has to do, have you communicated about it?
Yeah.
As somebody says, I need to be in the hospital every 2 days with my sick relative, so I will be out every second day. Fine. Right? Don't depend on that person every second day.
Yeah.
But if it suddenly becomes, we cannot reach Patrick, we cannot reach John, what's going on? Why can't we reach him? And then it turns into those kind of conversations. Really difficult, because that's the moment where it starts to affect everyone around them as well.
So it escalates.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to, and that's really tricky. Like I haven't been in a situation like that specifically. Like right now,
let's hope it's
yeah,
last
exactly.
for a little bit longer.
Like right now in product, it's like, okay, I have so on and so forth, or my son got sick, like I have to take the day off. I'm like, absolutely. And people are very, maybe I take that for granted, but people are clear. with what they do and how they spend their time. I've never been in a situation where it's unclear for a longer period of time. Like, sure, things pop up, and I had a person that broke up with a significant other and then also decided to buy another, like a house. And it was like major life changes back to back to back. And then, yeah, that person was sorting their life out. Like, I know that. And even though they might not be clear with their communication, I know things are unclear. So that's like the leeway that you then give them.
Yeah.
When it becomes kind of not clear for a longer time, it's like a mishire in the end, because it affects deadlines, it affects the people around them. It's like the flakiness, but also...
Yeah. Well, let's start by calling it a learning opportunity for the other person.
Okay.
Maybe, hopefully they haven't been through it before either.
Yeah.
And they just need to learn how to communicate in those times. But indeed, if that doesn't improve, then at some point it becomes a mishire.
Yeah, it looks very difficult to me. Like, I haven't been in a position where I had to act where something like that happened. But I feel like the more people you are responsible for, the more you are kind of you keep top of mind the greater good, which also means that sometimes you have to make tough decisions. Like, for me, I like to be friends with the people I work with. I think we work better if we are friends, if I know at least a little bit about them. But then those conversations become harder and harder, right? When we talk about more the business sense, where people are maybe not performing, or indeed they are a bit flaky, there are learning opportunities, but if they don't capitalize on that, then that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is just a minor thought I just had was, this is probably why escalations are also not a bad thing, right? Because I hope as a manager, you have a good relationship with all your direct reports. And that when it comes to the point like, hey, maybe we need to let somebody go, then there's at least a level up that can bring a more balanced perspective of, okay, maybe that doesn't have a personal relationship with.
Yeah.
Like for me, I'm responsible for many people. I wouldn't even know the exact number right now, but it's north of 150. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha.
So I don't know everyone. It's impossible.
You cannot.
I cannot.
No.
Of course, I know quite a few because I've been there for so long.
Yeah.
But it also helps me sometimes with when they come to me with, hey, John, what should we do here? I don't have a personal relationship, so I can just take the bigger picture. It doesn't take away from the fact that we're all human and we should be staying human and take everything into account that we can. But it does help.
I can see that. I'm wondering, as kind of one of the final thoughts I had, how do you measure success? Because right now for me in product, it's like, okay, I was thinking when I was software engineering, you deliver something, you see if it has value, product metrics with product, sometimes OKRs, indeed KPIs, those are all the measurements. When you're responsible for personal development, things become more soft. Like, it's not really as tangible. It's definitely not black and white. It might be more qualitative data, but then again, is there any data? How do you measure if the vision that you have or how people are moving, if it's going in the right direction? I feel like it's also sometimes maybe a longer time horizon.
Yeah.
If I deliver a feature and we have 2 weekly sprint cycles, it's like, in 2 weeks you can see a demo of what we built, basically.
Yeah.
If I say, okay, this is our North Star and this is the vision, and as an analytics department, we should move that way. It's like, good luck measuring that.
See you in a year.
Exactly.
Oh, it's a very fun conversation. To answer the first part first is, how do you measure that? There are, of course, things you can look at, like what's your attrition rate? Are people leaving en masse? Are people leaving really quickly? Like, did we mishire from either side? Are we delivering? That's a simple one, of course, because that's also very people related. But also another one that is much less tangible, but I definitely keep back in my mind. If people leave, where are they going to? Are they going to a competitor that's roughly equal, or are they moving on to bigger and better things?
Gotcha.
Whatever that may mean. And as long as I know it's bigger and better, whatever that is, I'm like, okay,
you can accept that. Yeah.
There's one of my good colleagues once mentioned it, like, if you see ING as playing football like Ajax or PSV or Feyenoord in the Eredivisie, and somebody moves to Barcelona or Bayern München or anything along those lines, you're like, all right, fair.
Well done.
Well done.
Yeah.
We had our part in getting them to move. If they suddenly move to, I'll tease him, to FC Dordrecht, okay, something went wrong.
Yeah, you remember that.
Yeah. No, so that's also a very intangible thing that I keep in the back of my mind. Are we successful as a company from a human perspective? Like, are we helping them? And of course, people staying is usually a very good indication that something good is going on. But then the second part about, sometimes I help set targets, or I have departmental goals and so on. Yeah, there is so much intangible or really easy to measure in a short time span in my job, that I found something else to get something tangible. It's like I just turned to do it yourself. I do plumbing and electrical wiring and so on. Something that gives me immediate feedback,
like immediate satisfaction.
Exactly. Yeah. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Because that used to be coding, of course, for me. Like compile doesn't work. Oh shit. Okay, something went wrong. All the tests pass. I did something well. Yeah, so I just replaced it in another part of my life.
That's really funny, actually. But consciously, or did you just start with it and it grew to what it is now?
No, I think it's also definitely consciously.
Interesting.
Yeah, just like doing sports, in my case, basketball, something super immediate feedback. I also need that in my life.
Yeah, makes sense. Like that's what I like product a lot. The hands-on part is what I miss.
Yeah.
And I had this dream of I can do hands-on and product stuff. But I'm like, am I then doing the right things? Because there's only one person responsible for product. It's like, I'm not going to be able to manage my own time. And especially if I set the priorities, I'm going to set priorities for fun time. And it's not good. It's not a good thing. So I haven't acted upon that thought.
No, it's a place where I've been twice now.
Okay.
And actually, I had an epiphany last week that I'm in the same position again.
Okay. Very recent.
Very recent. But the first one was exactly this. It wasn't a product. It was people management, I think. Anyway, I was coding and I wanted to do the exact thing. I'm going to stay coding, be in a squad, I'm going to deliver things, be a data engineer, and there were other things at the side. And then at some point I had a walk with one of my managers, and he was like, yeah, John, but doing two things at the same time means you're probably not doing both things very well, or at least not as good as you could. So he's like, yeah, at some point you got to make a choice. And then in my personality, it's like, okay, then I make the choice and it's done. So I made that choice that day.
I like that.
I need to step away from coding because it's not helping anyone really. I was getting into the squeeze of, I was basically turning into the review monster. I didn't produce any code anymore. I was just there to do the reviews.
Yeah.
And I was also probably not doing my best as I think people manager back then, or product, I don't remember. Anyway,
it's a good epiphany.
It was a good epiphany.
Yeah.
So I needed to step away from coding back then because for me, at least, it's something that takes long, uninterrupted periods of focused time, which were hard to combine with the other stuff that I did. So it was the first time I had to make a choice. And at least me being me, I was like, okay, from next week or next sprint, whatever, I'll stop coding. But last week I had the same epiphany, is that if you want to grow as a manager and work more strategic, is you also need to go to the second one of just really stepping out of almost any operational kind of thing. So what I mentioned earlier, while it is a strength of mine that I know analytics very well and I lead an analytics department, it's also my pitfall because I am woefully out of date with everything last. So you now get the danger of me thinking I still know the content while I don't. And even if I do still know the content, am I the one that should be steering on content, or should I be getting the content delivered to me and help make a decision?
Yeah.
Right. So now I seem to be nearing the second point where, of course, it's super important to keep the content with me, but not actively use it anymore because it's probably detrimental to everyone around me.
I can see that. I mean, as you grow, I feel like the priorities of the greater good become more important for a person in a leadership position, right? And if your own priorities align, or at least like you get satisfaction out of doing those priorities, then that's a win-win. But I'm assuming that's not always the case, right? Especially if you're hands-on and you get to choose what work you work on what you like. I see people navigate and do that all the time. I want to do this technical work, then we see how we fit that in, or you push for your things you believe in that are also fun. And it's definitely not a byproduct. It's definitely also sometimes the main thing. But for the greater good, things change, right? Especially from my position, looking sometimes to leadership, it's like, I believe these things need to be done.
Yeah.
And if no one likes doing them, they still need to be done. That's the hard part. And I feel like if you are then responsible and you also share that vision, because obviously you have to believe that, then you will pick it up, I'm assuming, or I'm wondering how you manage your priorities otherwise.
Yeah, it's this is why it's always a good question to yourself and more in relationship to where I want to go is, where do I get my energy from? Right? Because let's say you're chasing titles or positions and so on, but you don't really actually like the work that needs to be done. Like if I would not be enjoying the, let's say, more strategic discussions and the stakeholder management that comes with my role, and really only there for the money and the title, then I would burn out very quickly. Right? That's why it's always a good question. It's also being asked to me. But do you get energy from whatever it is that is now being asked of you? Because otherwise, what will probably happen? I'll keep prioritizing that. I keep meddling, let's say it like that, in content, because that's where I really get my energy from. So that's also is a good check to do with yourself. Like, what do I like? What do we like to work on? And also coming to the realization, if the next step in whatever field is that I'm in now, but I don't even like what that next step would mean, well, then maybe that's not the next step. Maybe that means something else, or that you're just good in what you are currently doing. Sometimes it always seems like it should be a race to the top, whatever the top is. But at some point, I've also asked myself, do I even want to grow further than this?
Yeah, it's because the top is growth, right? That's why upwards is growth, basically.
Yeah.
I feel like there's this notion, and maybe even I agree with it. It's like if you stay still, you're stagnant, which means you're not growing.
Yeah.
Like even though I know practically you can grow in your communication, you can grow in your hard skills, things evolve, you keep up to date, that means you're already growing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like growth. It feels like growth if you get a promotion, if you climb the ladder, basically. And if you stop climbing, it's like, oh, this person doesn't have ambition. Or at least sometimes that's the notion I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's also a real sign of maturity when somebody says, like, I'm happy here. Like, and that's also why I think it's very important to not lose track of the fact that work is just a part of your life, hopefully. I mean, for some it equals, it doesn't for me. It's also definitely not the only or even most important thing in my life. Maybe sometimes it's very good to be comfortable in your work, and then you have more room, mental headspace to do something more daring outside of work. Having a kid, for example, I have two. I would say, be comfortable in your work when you're in your first kid lands. Like I wouldn't recommend going through a very stressful time
startup
at work.
and
Maybe not. No, maybe not start your own startup. Maybe if you're the fourth person in and you're really resilient, maybe. But yeah, like,
there's a lot of maybes still.
There's a lot of maybes.
Yeah.
Like so, there is so much to grow in life. Work is not the only thing.
I love that perspective. One of my colleagues said, I work to live, basically, and some people live to work.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to stick with me forever.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed this conversation, John. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks.
Before we round off, is there anything you'd still like to share?
What would I like to share?
I always throw this curveball at the end, and stuff either comes out or people are like, no, I'm happy. I know a lot of people are listening more than I expected to. At least I have this feeling.
Okay.
So yeah.
No, reiterate the last message I gave. It's like, there's more to work, more to life than work.
Awesome. Cool. Then thank you so much for coming on again. We'll round it off here. If you're still here, let us know in the comment section what you thought of this episode. Like if you liked it, and otherwise we'll see you on the next one.